So obvious, as a matter of fact, that Bel K decided that I didn't need to tell you about it. It's 12:05 and a good afternoon. Welcome in.
If they want to know, they should listen.
That's true. That's the whole point, right? If you miss a moment, you miss a lot of the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. And hello. Glad you're with us. May I be the first to say a good afternoon. Let's get the pleasantries out of the way and get this show lumbering under its own weight. It's Wednesday, January 24, 2024. It is our episode 498. We'll have to wait until Monday to reach episode 500 because I'm here tomorrow. That's 499. And I'm not here Friday. The redheaded stranger, Pamela Furr, in for me on Friday. So there you go. We are pleased you've decided to join us today. We've lots to do. We invite your telephone calls, your conversation, your super text, whatever they might be. 615-737-9986, 615-737-WWTN. I'm hopeful that we will have an opportunity to have a conversation with the House Majority Leader, William Lamberth, about legislation that he has proposed that would put to death or at least allow for the death penalty for child rape cases in the state of Tennessee. We're going to talk about that on the show today, and I'm getting your conversation going at 615-737-9986, meaning I want to hear from you regarding some of the conversation that's happening at the General Assembly on Capitol Hill about this issue. We will also talk about Trumpy Trump from last night. Donald Trump doing Donald Trump things. I did not believe that Donald Trump's speech was in any way angry. I thought it was very Trumpian. And I need look no further than the hashtag never CNNs of the world to realize how Trumpian, in fact, it was. In as much as Donald Trump says Trumpian things and CNN screams that he's being angry. What? He's being angry? Well, no, he's being victorious is what he's being. This is beginning to remind me a lot of 2016. I'm elephantine. I remember 2016. I reported on 2016. I was Trump's boy in 2016. I'm his boy now. And I remember all of this. I remember so many Republicans telling us what Trump needed to do and doesn't need to do in order to secure victory. I remember all of these never-Trumpers telling us why none of this will ever happen, ever, ever, ever in the history of ever. I remember all of the Democrats with their hair on fire. I remember the mainstream media with its hair on fire. I mean, does anyone else not remember all of this happening in 2015 the same way it's happening today? All of this happening at the beginning of the primary the same way that it's happening today? Oh, Donald Trump can't say that. Donald Trump can't do that. The people won't respond to that. Donald Trump's a dictator. Donald Trump's an authoritarian. I was listening to my good friend, Chris Hand, while I was on the way in. And he was having a conversation with some knucklehead, and he was handling him very well. And Hand was asking said knucklehead to explain his love of Nikki Haley, and all he did was trash Trump. And he kept saying, oh, well, he won't leave office. And Chris Hand, rightly so, is like, well, wait a minute. He left office the last time. Yeah, but he didn't want to. Yeah, but he did. What part of he did aren't you understanding? Why would he, if he's such a dictator, authoritarian, that wants to turn America into some sort of dystopian, socialist hellscape or whatever it might be, why didn't he start back then? Makes no sense. So we'll get into Trump doing Trump things, won by, roughly 10%. Especially considering how many Democrats crossed over and voted in the undeclared category for Nikki Haley, some of them declaring so on MSNBC and CNN, hashtag never CNN. Don't watch CNN. I'll watch that garbage network so you don't have to. Considering the amount of crossover that will not happen in South Carolina, that will not happen in other contested states. And it's important to note this, and I want to note it real quickly, and I'm going to get onto a couple of other things. So the Democrats did not have a race. Now, I understand that Joe Biden had a write-in campaign mounted for him, but there were no delegates at stake in New Hampshire. There was a disagreement. New Hampshire wanted to be first in the nation. They want to be the first primary in the nation for Republicans and the first primary in the nation for Democrats. And the Democrats took that away from them because they decided that New Hampshire is too white. No, I'm not making that up. That's why they did it. Because they're so invested in Biden getting reelected, they felt like they needed to wait to South Carolina before they did anything else. So they took away the first primary in the nation status for New Hampshire and gave it to South Carolina for the Democrat Party. So no Democrat delegates were at stake for New Hampshire last night. And so some of the media networks were, well, Joe Biden in this write-in campaign. Well, whatever. I mean, they mounted a write-in campaign so Dean Phillips did not beat him and make him look bad on the Democrat side of things. But most Democrats in New Hampshire recognized that there was no reason to vote in the Democrat primary, so they did not declare themselves Democrats. They declared themselves undeclared as a primary voter, and they went on and voted in the Republican primary. And many of them, most of them, the vast majority of them, voted for Nikki Haley, not because they love Nikki Haley, but because they hate Donald Trump. If anything, the 55 to 45 percentile cut, I believe, will be more representative of what we can expect in the general election coming up in November, and Donald Trump will certainly be on the ballot for the Republican Party come November, absent any unforeseen dramatic circumstances. So while it's over, I don't get into the business of telling people what to do with their lives. I don't get into the business with telling people what to do with their money. So if more donors want to waste more money on top of the money that they've already wasted on Nikki Haley, so be it. So be it. Nikki Haley can hang around as long. I mean, you know what? This is America. You get to do what you want to do with your time and your energy and your money. And if you want to waste time, energy, and other people's money continuing a campaign that's going nowhere, have at it. Have at it. You've already harmed your reputation to the point that I don't know that there's a there moving down the road. Ron DeSantis did it the right way. Ron DeSantis made a simple miscalculation. He felt that people would be able or be ready, not able, but ready to move on from Donald Trump by 2024. He felt like the base of the Republican Party would be ready for something new by 2024. Well, most of us, whether you're a conservative, a libertarian, if you love liberty and freedom, you feel like there is unfinished business. You feel like something happened in 2020 along the way that shouldn't have happened, and it's time to correct a few wrongs. And it was a miscalculation. I don't fault him for the miscalculation. I think Ron DeSantis is a good governor. I think he has good core values and beliefs. He was not that good of a candidate, certainly in comparison to Donald J. But he did it the right way. You get in, you work, you get to the point where you recognize that there's no real path forward. Why would you waste your time, your energy, and other people's money anymore? Well, you don't have anything else to do. Nikki, well, you do have something else to do if you're Ron DeSantis. You've got a state to govern. Nikki Haley doesn't have anything else to do. So I'm all in on it. We'll discuss it. We'll dissect it. We'll offer you a couple of thoughts about the guys behind Trump last night. Tim Scott was there. Vivek Ramaswamy was there. He gave both of them an opportunity to say hello. Tom Homan was there, who I hope is soon to be the Director of Homeland Security. I think that will be the case if Donald Trump gets another shot at governing for the next 4 years, starting in January 2025. So a year from now. It's up. Hey, check my dates. I want to say it's almost exactly a year from now. If you want to feel better about this country, and I need to after this week, if you want to feel better about the United States of America, how about the idea that about a year from now, at some point during the week, this week, we'll have a new president of the United States of America. And that man will be named Donald J. Trump. And Joe Biden will go to the trash heap of history, replacing Jimmy Carter as the worst president in modern times.
January 20th of 2025.
There you go. So less than a year from now. Let's count down the days, baby. We ought to have a countdown clock on the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I kind of like that idea. So January 20th, and it's the 24th today. It's leap year this year, so that's going to – all right, Bell.
That'll be a Monday.
Over the next – yes, it normally is. Over the next 2 hours and 45 minutes, I want you to put your math hat on and do some calculating and tell me how many days we have left until January 20th of 2025.
Whew, that's a lot of ciphering.
Well, I want to say it's 361, but then there's an extra day in there for leap day, so that would be 362 then, right? Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah.
I was told there would be no math.
Yeah, I have a calculator in my pocket, by the way.
Oh, I saw you calculating time earlier today. I saw what you were doing. And you do have a calculator in your pocket. Kari Lake, we'll talk about, it's Kari, right? It's not Carrie, it's Kari Lake. Kari Lake, we'll talk about Kari Lake and the audio that came out as we were leaving the airwaves yesterday afternoon, making a lot of Republicans look bad. Oh, my goodness, I got a short here. I got to fix my short. There we go. Every time I bump that, it cuts out in my headphones. But I want to do this now. So I decided last night, if you've listened to the show this week, I admit that I've been somewhat depressed. I have been somewhat out of sorts. I allow for my pessimism on occasion. I am naturally a pessimist. Sad as it is to say, I do not believe that we can stop the ship of state from running into the iceberg that is socialism. I believe that we are addicted in the United States of America. Oh, I'm getting a lot of days on the super text line. 362, John says. $21.99. You're right, Matt. 362. 362 days left until we have a new president of the United States of America. God bless America. Okay.
That's actually what I got, too. So I feel a little
there you go.
More confident in my math skills.
I feel pretty good about that, Matt. I'm naturally a pessimist when I think of the long-term future of the United States. And it's a simple analysis. I believe that we have become, as a nation, addicted. And we're addicted to money. We're addicted to spending. We're addicted to overspending. Every day in America's existence, we borrow money against treasury bonds that someone buys because they get a decent amount of interest rate return when they do. And every day we contribute to the burdensome trillions of dollars of debt that we're leaving for our children and our grandchildren that we will never repay. It is becoming increasingly impossible to foresee a country that can even balance our budget, because in order to do this, you have to convince politicians to convince their constituents that they don't get so much ice cream from the government anymore. So that's going on in my head all the time. All the time. And then if you've been listening over the last week, you've heard me get rather despondent about conservatives and libertarians and how we choose to fight amongst ourselves as opposed to collectively face the enemy that truly wants to destroy this great nation before our very eyes. And I decided last night that I needed to get my crap together. And once again, I'm speaking directly to those of you who have listened to the show over the last couple of days. Because day before yesterday, I was just depressed, absolutely depressed. And yesterday, some of that carried over. Depressed about a lot of things, where we're going as a nation, the possibility of them dumping Trump. I mean, all of it. But mostly this concept of purity conservatism and how conservatives have decided, instead of collectively getting together and facing the real enemy that are the liberals, that are the Democrats, that are the media, but I repeat myself, instead of doing that, we choose to fight amongst ourselves, and you're not really a conservative, and you're not really you're a rhino, and you're a rhino. And it had me down. I admit it. But I decided last evening that it's time to get our crap together and move forward with a more positive attitude. And you folks did that for me. Because I had so many nice people, and I love every single one of you, and I thank every single one of you reaching out on the super text line, reaching out on email, calling me. Literally, people found my telephone number, which is available online. If you want my cell phone number, you just go to my Facebook page and you can see it. I don't hide my cell phone number because I don't answer. But I warn you, if I don't recognize the number, I'm not answering my cell phone anyway. So It's no skin off my nose. Point being is I had telephone calls, I had emails, I had Facebook Messenger correspondence, I had Twitter and all of that. So many different people writing to me and saying so many kind things. And Bell, if you did not know any better, based on these kind messages and words, I mean, people are writing me, telling me that they're praying for me. I told my wife last night that if you did not know any better, if someone just came into my inbox on my email and read some of the emails, you would think that I had cancer or something. Oh, we're praying for you. We hope you get better. And I appreciate that. Don't get me wrong. But I'm thinking, folks, I'm fine. I'm all good. This is going to work out one way or the other. The thing that really got me was when, I had a guy, I'll read it to you. I had a guy writing me from jail, which has become a regular occurrence, by the way. But this guy, Sean, wrote me from jail. Mr. Murphy, this is Sean, yada, 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 from yada, yada, yada. If you're acting on your show on 122, you're doing a hell of a job. Otherwise, I hope you feel better. So a guy's in jail telling me that he hopes I feel better. And at that point, I'm like, my God, I got to get my stuff together, right? And so I'm back, baby. I'm in a more positive attitude. I'm in a positive frame of mind. I'm going to work every single day to try to make a better place for the United States of America, for you, your family, and your children. How about that? Can we agree on all of that? It's 12:21 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Any thoughts on last night's results? We'll take your calls on that. Cameron Smith coming up in the 2 o'clock hour. Maybe Majority Leader William Lamberth, if he has a moment or two to share with us to talk about his legislation. And I'll tell you all about that legislation in just a moment. And the several Democrats that are against it. That's on the way next on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Stand by. Hey, friends, it's Matt Murphy. Let's talk about efficient heating and cooling, and let's talk about your AC and your heater in your own home. Jeff Eddy wants to talk with you. He wants to help you, as a matter of fact. Jeff Eddy has a crew, several of them, never commissioned. That means that they don't try to upsell you on anything that they do inside of your home. They are as trustworthy as they come at Jeff Eddy's Efficient Heating and Cooling. That means simply this, that you can trust them in your home. You can trust them to tell you the right thing. They are the second opinion experts when it comes to replacing your unit. Sadly, a lot of HVAC companies decide that it's the easier thing to do to tell you that it's time to replace your unit. They make more money that way. Jeff Eddy does not do that. He understands that you are a baller on a budget and you need to save money where you can. You don't want to just throw $5,000 or $6,000 for a new unit if you don't need it, which is why I recommend Efficient Heating and Cooling. Call Jeff Eddy if your heater's not ready. Efficient Heating and Cooling can be found at efficienthvac.net. That's efficienthvac.net. Or call 615-784-4424. 784-4424 for our friends at Efficient. I promise you'll be happy you called. 615-784-4424. Tell them Matt Murphy sent you. Hey, friends, it's Matt Murphy for the world-famous Glock Store. I've been telling you how important training is toward being a safe and effective gun owner. With that in mind, many of you, you're already safe, you're already effective gun owners, but you're looking for the next challenge to bring your skills to the next level. Well, I've got that challenge. It's called the Sentinel Training Session from Shoot270.com and the indoor range at the world-famous Glock Store. It is an immersive training experience designed to instill and advance your skills in things like crisis response and active shooter scenarios. They want to talk to you, they want to see you, and they want you to sign up. From realistic scenarios to crisis-related medical training to resource management during crisis situations, you'll be prepared to handle whatever comes your way. Heck, I might be there with donuts that morning. It's February the 3rd at the world-famous Glock Store. Go to shoot270.com or glockstore.com to find out more. I think it's on shoot270.com. If you click on events, you'll find it there. It's an intense amount of training and preparation, and so it is a limited participant experience. It's limited to less than 20 people. For complete information and to sign up, I think they have a couple of seats available. Go to shoot270.com. That's shoot270.com. And simply go by the world-famous Glock Store to see what you're missing. An incredible indoor shooting range. They do not have lanes. They have rooms, plus more short guns, long guns. I mean, they've got everything you could imagine to support the Second Amendment at the world-famous Glock Store. Tell them Matt Murphy sent you to the one and only Glock Store. Super Talk 99.7 WTN 1227, Matt Murphy and you. I appreciate Kari Lake. I do. I appreciate the audio that came out that many of you have already heard. If you've not, we'll play a condensed version of it for you. It's basically this. It's Kari Lake talking to a GOP representative who's telling her, his name is Jeff. I have his last name here somewhere. He's telling her that the big money boys back east want her to stay out of the Senate race, and they're willing to pay. They're willing to find her some corporate gig. They're willing to pay her some level of money, some amount of money. She said that she wouldn't take $1 billion for any of this. But Kari Lake comes off looking pretty good. Now, she lost her gubernatorial run, and now she's running for Senate. She says that she spoke at CPAC after she delivered a Ronald Reagan dinner address the night before, and she claims that at the Conservative Political Action Conference that someone showed up at her door and bribed her to get out of politics. Now, she's a former news anchor, as you might know. She lost the gubernatorial race in Arizona. She refused to concede the race. She believed that the election was stolen from her. She filed a lawsuit toward that end. The Arizona Court of Appeals rejected her claim, calling it speculation. She said that she would take the case to the state Supreme Court and has yet to do so, it's my understanding. She says that the individual in question on the audio offered her a position on a board and a large salary, which she refused. Now, she made this statement months ago. I mean, this was back last summer, I want to say. It was either spring or summer where she made the case that someone tried to bribe her. Well, now this audio is coming out, and I don't know why it's coming out now. Part of me wonders how low our standards have gotten when we look at someone like Kari Lake and think so highly of her for doing what every single politician should do. It reminded me a little bit of, if you remember the old Chris Rock bit, which I can't recreate and we can't play because there's far too much cursing in it. But Chris Rock is talking about people who's like, I take care of my kids. What do you mean? What do you want, a cookie? You take care of your kids. It's what you're supposed to do. Right? Like, don't expect to be patted on the back for doing the basic responsibilities of life. I think it's a floor responsibility of a politician that we expect that you will not be bribed. So while I appreciate this coming out, and I appreciate Kari Lake for what she represents, which is a different type of politician, I'm not going to bend over backwards to applaud her for doing something that I expect that every politician will do. So that's one side of it. But the other side of it is important. It is important to expose these individuals that think that they're more important than you. It is important to expose these individuals that think that behind the scenes they can control the entirety of the process and give you the illusion that you have some sort of say in the matter. That's what we mean when we talk about rich men north of Richmond. That's why the popularity of the song was what it was. And that's why Donald Trump represents what he represents. A breaking of that deep state cabal that exists in Washington, D.C. More on that coming up. John, you're in Cookeville, and you'll be next. It's 12:31 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Hey, folks, it's Matt Murphy, and I want to tell you about the Dr. Gill Center for Back, Neck, and Chronic Pain Relief located in Franklin. And within the sound of my voice, it is well worth the drive to alleviate pain on your person without the need for pills, without the need for needles, and without the consideration for surgery. And I want to tell you all about it. The Dr. Gill Center is simply the best when it comes to chiropractic care, but it's much more than that nowadays. They do a lot of soft tissue care with their red light therapy, their Class 5 laser system, and much, much more. Plus, the spinal decompression is so good at allowing your back to breathe, if you will, to get the needed nutrients, the nutrition, and the hydration into your back area to help heal and to help alleviate the pain that exists in your back. So whatever your issue, they want to see you at the Dr. Gill Center. The $39 special still exists for the Dr. Gill Center. That means your initial consultation and appointment is just to that. Go talk to Dr. Wendy, Dr. V, Dr. D, the rest of the gang at the Dr. Gill Center for Back, Neck, and Chronic Pain Relief. I know you'll be happy that you did. The Dr. Gill Center. Here's the telephone number to schedule that appointment today. 615-882-4838. 882-4838. Who knows? You may see me at the Dr. Gill Center for Back, Neck, and Chronic Pain Relief in Franklin. It is Super Talk 99.7 WTN, Matt Murphy and you, 1236, Libertarian Lunch in progress. By the way, I failed to ask Bel K the question. I got distracted during the first segment of the show. It's episode 498. We're on a variety of platforms. You can find us online on any internet streaming platform of your choosing, like TuneIn, like iHeart, like Spotify and others. You can carry us wherever you go by downloading our app and taking us with your smartphone wherever you might travel. You can also listen on the radio side of things, 99.7. And for those masochists in the listening audience, you can look at me do the show on Super Talk TV, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Twitch is up and running. And episode 498, which is entitled Every Day by Bel K, a.k.a. Headless Bell. Well, today's title is?
Now, there's a story behind this, so don't anybody get their panties in a bunch right off the bat.
Okay.
Matt Murphy killing all the pedos. Because, yeah.
That's it?
Yeah.
Well, that leads us into this story. Gloria Johnson is a Democrat representative from the Knoxville area. Gloria Johnson sits on a committee that heard testimony regarding a bill proposed by Representative William Lamberth. And Gloria Johnson, Democrat Knoxville, yesterday was the only member of the Tennessee State House Criminal Justice Subcommittee to vote against legislation that would allow prosecutors to pursue a death penalty sentence for convicted child rapists. Now, as an aside, I would say this, and I'm going to talk to Steve Abramowitz about this a little more in depth tomorrow on the show. This was in a subcommittee. How do we know that Gloria Johnson voted against this legislation that passed? Because I know that Steve and others have been waving their arms trying to get the attention of folks like me with regard to the idea that they pass a lot of things on voice vote in committee. And they do so for reasons that we've described on the show. And for reasons described by Steve and others, they want more transparency in the Tennessee House of Representatives, to which some in the Tennessee House of Representatives suggest that would take months longer than the current legislative session already takes, one way or the other. We do know that Gloria Johnson voted against a bill that would allow prosecutors to pursue the death penalty for convicted child rapists because she demanded that she be verified as a no vote. She was seen on video verifying her no vote by making a thumbs down gesture as the clerk was tallying the voice votes in question. After an exchange with Representative William Lamberth over his bill, which is House Bill 1663, Johnson voted against the legislation. The bill amends existing law that authorizes, quote, the death penalty as punishment for the rape of a child, aggravated rape of a child, or especially aggravated rape of a child. Johnson, and I have the audio, and I hesitate going further because I can't find it. I don't know where it went. I thought I had it pulled up, and I've now lost it. But I have audio of Johnson in the Criminal Justice Subcommittee. I've got the quote here, too, but it's better hearing her say it. She justifies her no vote by suggesting that it would impact the willingness of people to come forward to report child rape. And not that it matters that much to me. I don't have any children. I wonder if Gloria Johnson has any children. Without knowing whether or not she does, I have a hard time believing that she does. Maybe she does. I don't know. But it's difficult for me to believe that because even without any children, her logic makes zero sense to me. I'll tell you what that is in just a moment. In the meantime, John is in Cookeville. John, thank you for the call. How are you, sir?
Pretty good, Matt. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. What's on your mind, John?
Oh, they've had a new motto. We know how Trump likes to say drill, baby, drill, and it's a chant. So I think the Democrats should start saying kill, baby, kill as their chant.
Well, they seem to be obsessed with it, don't they?
Even with what you were just talking about, it's okay. We don't want to kill the people that mess with a child. That's okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously there's some hypocrisy that goes on amongst the Democrats. Kill, baby, kill for the Democrats.
They should be chanting it out there proudly.
Well, I doubt we can get them to take us up on it, but I like it, John.
All right.
Thanks,
Have a good
brother.
day, man.
All right, man. You do too. I appreciate the call. 615-737-9986. 615-737-WWTN. Here's some of the exchange yesterday in the Criminal Justice Subcommittee between several assembled members of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives and Gloria Johnson.
And that we will hold you harshly accountable. So thank you for your courage.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This crime is a 100% time crime, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I believe so.
So if they were sentenced to life in prison, they have to serve life in prison, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you. So have you talked to any victims groups?
And by the way, this is the exchange between Gloria Johnson and the sponsor of the legislation, William Lambert.
That do work with victims about this legislation and how they feel about it?
Yes, I have. And amongst the community of individuals that assist with victims of these type of crimes, you will get a variety of answers. It is a very difficult thing to try to ask them to wade into this. What they want is for these crimes not to occur. What they want is for these children that have been horrendously attacked, many times by those that love them or are supposed to protect them, for that not to have happened. And they pick up the pieces of broken lives every day. So I've tried really hard not to put this on their shoulders because, quite frankly, this is a policy decision for us as elected officials to make. But it is extremely difficult, regardless of what the penalty is, whether it's life imprisonment, whether it's death. It is unfathomable. And I want to thank all of those groups that help children that have been sexually abused by these predators for the help that they give to these children for a lifetime, even when they're an adult. Because it's something that none of the rest of us can truly understand. And so, yes, I've talked to them, and it is mixed as to how they feel about these. But again, I feel like we should all come together and support those groups and support these children, while at the same time we are making a policy decision on what the penalty should be for these horrendous crimes.
Well, these people do definitely have to be held accountable. We can do that with life in prison. The concern in the victims I've talked to come to when much of the time with this particular crime, it's familial. And if there is a young child who was raped by an uncle, say, and the uncle's going to say, don't tell, because then I'll be killed. I'll get the death penalty. And then you'll have the mother of the child, who's the sister of the perp, who maybe won't want to testify against her brother if it means the death penalty.
Okay, that's the heart of what I wanted to hear from Gloria Johnson. Gloria Johnson is making the case to defend child rapists by suggesting that we should not offer as a possible punishment the death penalty. And the reason, and you just heard her there, the reason that she offers this defense of capping the possibility of their punishment at life in prison is that if the death penalty is a possibility on the table, that the mother, this is the example that she brought up. And it's why I have a difficult time. I don't know if she has any kids. She doesn't have really any personal information about herself online, but I mean, and if she has no kids, that's fine. I just have a difficult time believing that a mother would say what she just said. Let's put a fine point on it. If a mother of an 8-year-old child discovered that her brother raped her daughter, do you think that mother would give one damn about whether or not that guy lived or died? What is Gloria Johnson talking about? I have long believed that the one crime in the United States of America that I believe ought to be punishable by death that doesn't involve the killing of another person is child rape. And I applaud William Lamberth, who I now understand will be on the show at 1:30 today. I just got word from Jennifer on that. I applaud William, 1:35, I should say. Dan Mandis might be listening. Appointment, baby, 1:35. I applaud him for bringing this up. Now, understand something. This not only has to pass the Tennessee General Assembly, it will also have to pass judicial scrutiny. And pushing this forward will cost the state of Tennessee a certain amount of money because we will have to defend it in a court. And there's certain severability clauses within 1663, I understand, that allow for the future court cases that are sure to come over this. I'm curious what you think about it. Is there any justification to what Gloria Johnson is saying? I don't think so. Where she claims that she has spoken to victims. I don't know that I believe that necessarily. Well, whatever. Who argue that because with this particular crime, it's familial. If there's a young child who was raped by an uncle, she said, an uncle is going to say, don't tell because I'll be killed. I'll get the death penalty. And then you'll have the mother of the child, who's the sister of the perp, who says, maybe I don't want to testify against her brother if it means the death penalty. You mean the person that just raped their child? I'll tell you, most people that I talk to, Gloria, I don't know who you're talking to in Tennessee. Most people that I talk to would suggest to you that you're lucky that mama doesn't try to kill them herself, brother or not. Johnson went on to say, victims fear it will create a chilling effect on reporting, and some people, especially in family situations, will not report. Do you believe that? Why is Gloria Johnson, while she's running for United States Senate, bending over backwards to protect child rapists? Is this really the hill she wants to die on? And that's her defense? That, oh, sure, we need to hold them accountable, but I'm concerned about re-victimizing the victim. I'm concerned that Gloria Johnson is way too concerned about the needs of the child rapist. How about the deterrence effect? That if in your sick, demented, twisted mind, you child rapist, if you come to the state of Tennessee and you get this in your head, you are going to die as a result. I'm just fascinated with the soft on crime approach. Maybe you're not. 615-737-9986. What are your thoughts on the possibility of putting to death child rapist in the state of Tennessee? The bill is going to the full body of the House of Representatives and will be debated in the Senate. It's 49 after the hour. 615-737-9986. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Oh, yeah, I want to make 2024 the year of you. Here's one way to do it, Craft Body Scan. Right now, you call and you book a very seamless and quick process by which you and your significant other, your spouse, your loved one, your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, you go to Craft Body Scan, and for $149, they will give both you and that significant other a couple's heart and lung scan. For $149, this is over a $2,000 value for you, $149. Lungs, heart, obviously incredibly important. You know that, right? And heart disease, sadly, is the number one killer in the United States of America. Lung cancer is the number one cancer killer in the United States. And oftentimes there are symptoms that happen. There are things that can be detected by a CT scan that you don't feel. Before you become symptomatic, go ahead and get checked. It gives you peace of mind. Here's what I want. I want you and that significant other of yours to go and get that $149 checkup. And Craft Body Scan give you the thumbs up once it's read by their board-certified radiologist. I love that idea because that's peace of mind. Plus, if they detect something early, then we can deal with it and it does not become life-threatening. That's what it's all about. Peace of mind and getting to the situation early rather than later. CraftBodyScan.com. That's CraftBodyScan.com or 615-436-1000. 436-1000. Craft Body Scan. By the way, coming up in the 1 o'clock hour, musician Chris Young, know Chris, love Chris, great country music artist, a great friend of the Charlie Daniels Journey Home Project, which is obviously an organization near and dear to my heart. We love David and everything they're doing at the Charlie Daniels Journey Home Project. I was disappointed when I saw that Chris Young was arrested for disorderly conduct and somehow assaulting an agent with the Alcohol and Beverage Control Board. I've now seen the video of the alleged incident, and let me tell you something. Somebody needs to get fired. Chris Young is owed an apology. These thugs that act like we can't. I got a lot to say about this. If you've seen the video, I think you will have a lot to say about it as well. I'm going to get some different eyeballs on it coming up in just a moment. I'm going to allow, during the top of the hour news, I'm going to allow Bell K to view the video and see what he has to say about it. I've just posted it up on my Facebook page. I'll try to get it transferred over to the Twitter site, at Matt Murphy Show. You can find me on Facebook, Matt Murphy, or Matt Murphy Show. Find it there. It is egregious, to say the least. In the meantime, we're talking about the death penalty for child rapists. This would give prosecutors the opportunity in the most egregious of cases to put death penalty on the table. I believe that child rape, that the pedophilia and the desire to rape is something that is irredeemable. I believe it is irreversible. I think mistakes were made in the wiring of people's brains. And while every case would not be eligible for the death penalty, I'm fine with the death penalty. I understand if you're not fine with the death penalty. I understand if you do not believe that the state should have that ultimate authority. That makes sense to me. It does not make any sense to me, the justification that Gloria Johnson is offering, that it would somehow cause people not to want to report. It's ridiculous. Real quick, let's talk to Mike. Well, no, Mike, I don't have time. We'll get to your calls momentarily. Andrew and Mike and Diane and Rebecca, and somebody's calling on line 4. A lot of people want to comment on this, and I want to give all of you the opportunity to do so on the phone lines, and we'll do that next on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Love having you with us. Love the Libertarian Lunch. Love our other 2 hours as well, and we got 2 to go. Coming up at 1:35 this afternoon, Representative William Lamberth will talk about his bill, 1663. We'll tell you the full story of the Chris Young incident. Chris Young was arrested and charged with like assaulting a police officer or a peace officer. And he didn't. You know how I know? Because I've seen the video. And he did nothing wrong. More to come on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Back at it. It's 105. Welcome in. Matt Murphy and you, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. A good afternoon. We've got 2 more hours to go. We'll hand off to Brian Wilson. At that time, it's live, it's local, it's information-fueled and opinion-driven on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Our episode 498 continues. Thank you for being around. Lots to get to. Congratulations to Donald J. Trump. He took care of business in New Hampshire last evening, dispatching of his one and only political rival in the Republican primary left. There were 13 to begin with. Now there's 2, Donald Trump and Nikki Haley. She leaned on a lot of Democrats and undeclared or undecided voters as to how she got to her 45-ish% figure. At least that's what it was last time I looked. Donald Trump obviously took care of business, and it's on to Nevada, then South Carolina, where he is expected to take care of business in both of those states and eventually will shore up the nomination. I'm not one to, a lot of people are saying, Nikki Haley needs to quit, Nikki Haley needs to quit. Nikki Haley will quit when Nikki Haley decides to quit. I mean, I'm not one to tell her what to do. It comes to no good. It's just pouring bad money after good or good money after bad, however the saying goes. So there's that story going on, and congrats to Donald Trump. Obviously, he will soon set his sights on Joe Biden, who will be the eventual Democrat nominee, one would expect, until they replace him at the convention. And then Donald Trump will have to pivot and take on whoever they replace him with, whether it's Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama or whoever. I do not believe that Joe Biden will be on the ballot in November. I don't know how you put him on the ballot in November. Did you see him yesterday? I mean, absolutely making no sense. More on that to come in the 2 o'clock hour with Cameron Smith on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. In the meantime, we're discussing the possibility of putting child rapists to death in the state of Tennessee. Representative William Lamberth, who will be on our show today starting at about 1:35, has proposed House Bill 1663. House Bill 1663 gives prosecutors the opportunity to request the death penalty in child rape cases. It passed through the Criminal Justice Subcommittee and goes to the Criminal Justice Committee now after a vote was held yesterday, I guess it was, in the General Assembly. On the Criminal Justice Subcommittee on the question of HB 1663, the only person that offered a pushback was Representative Gloria Johnson, who is known as being one of the Bullhorn Trio. She is also attempting to run as a Democrat against Marsha Blackburn. I think she's got a primary to go through before she gets there. Johnson expressed concern about a mother of a child who might not tell on her brother if her brother rapes the woman's daughter. If there's a young child who was raped by an uncle, she said, an uncle's going to say, don't tell them because I'll be killed. I'll get the death penalty. Then you'll have the mother. Who gives a damn what the uncle has to say about any of this? Oh, it just burns me up. Burns me up. And then Gloria Johnson, choosing to defend a child rapist as opposed to the children themselves, says then you'll have the mother of the child who's the sister of the perp who maybe won't want to testify against her brother if it means the death penalty. Johnson then went on to say victims fear it will create a chilling effect on reporting. What victims? What victims is she talking to? I mean, maybe those victims exist. I would be willing to listen to those victims. I don't know that they do exist, though. And some people, especially in family situations, will not report. They're also concerned about re-victimizing the victim every time an appeal comes up. They'll have to tell the story over again. For his part, William Lamberth, I'll let him say most of this when he comes on with us in about 20 minutes or so. He says the chilling effect this will have, let the message go out far and wide. If you rape a child in the state of Tennessee, then you will die. If it saves one child from going through that, if the fear of that gets in the head of some monster out there that's even thinking about this, it's worth saving that child. A lot of comment on the super text line and a lot of comment on the phone lines. 615-737-9986. Let's talk to Andrew in Hendersonville. Andrew, thank you for your call. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for taking me. I will try to be brief. I'm glad you've spoken so frankly on this, my friend, because I feel that in Tennessee we need to do everything we can do politically, at the political level, and the church to stop the LGBTQ and sexualization and rape of children, because if our society cannot fight that and stop that, then I feel like that's the last straw before God, and I'm a devout follower of Jesus, before God would give up on humanity, because it's totally evil and satanic and barbaric that these things happen, and there's not enough pushback. So I'm glad our legislature is pushing back against child rape, and I very much understand why you and other people think people who rape children cannot be helped. I am not 100% convinced of that in every case. I hope that people, if you hit them with the gospel and offer them a way out of hell, that they can turn around and want to be saved. But we do have to stop this. And the death penalty, as far as I can discern, should be an option for this. But, yeah.
No. I was going to say that, there was a time in my public career that I waffled about the death penalty because of my belief in God and his being the ultimate judgment as to life or death, because I believe in the sanctity of life. And I don't waffle very much anymore because as a society that believes in a level of justice, there are certain crimes that are so heinous and against society and against humanity that the only appropriate justice for those crimes is death itself. That said, I can think of no other crime that I would apply the death penalty to that doesn't involve the death of a human being other than child rape. But I most certainly would say that anyone that is capable, and Andrew, thank you, I'm going to get to as many as I can, anyone that is capable of pedophilia of a child less than 12 years old or 12 or under, we're not talking about 16-year-olds. I mean, and that's another subject. Anyone that's capable of this deserves at least the consideration. It is not mandatory. Several of you have asked. It gives the prosecutors the ability to ask for the death penalty, as prosecutors have the ability to ask for the death penalty in other capital offenses. 5019 says, I hate to be a Van Gogh. Good for you. Since I just tuned in, but can you understand someone being against the death penalty for religious reasons? Why do you think a mother not wanting to testify against her child rapist is so impossible if doing so would mean death? I understand people that are against the death penalty. Absolutely. I understand that if you're against the death penalty, you're against the death penalty. I understand that potential. A mother, so your suggestion is that a mother would not want to testify against, for example, her brother if the possibility existed that he would be put to death, and so she would withhold her testimony? If that testimony, and she's doing so for a religious reason. Okay, 5019, I'm going to answer your question directly. So in that case, where if I'm a prosecutor and I want to ask for the death penalty, and I realize that I need the testimony of the mother of the child that was raped, well, then obviously I have the ability to take the death penalty off the table. So if the woman is going to say, no, I'm not going to testify, I refuse to testify because you've got the death penalty, then I have the ability to take the death penalty off the table and say, okay, we're going to go for life in prison. I need you to testify for me. Otherwise, if I don't need her testimony, I move forward with the case without her testimony, and I get the death penalty that way. I understand if someone has a sincerely held religious belief that they do not believe the state should have the authority to kill someone. Okay, if that person in that circumstance, which I have a hard time believing will ever come up, but if it does come up and this person is so against the death penalty that they're not willing to testify against the person that raped their child, then you downshift to life in prison in those cases. All I want is the prosecutor to have the ability in the most heinous of these cases to do the proper punishment for the crime committed. Sometimes the crime committed is so heinous and against society and against humanity, the only appropriate punishment is death. I don't believe in the death penalty for revenge, for vengeance, for retribution. I believe in an appropriate punishment for the crime committed. And sometimes there is no other appropriate punishment than death. Diane's in the borough. Diane joins us now. Hey, Diane, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for the call.
Thank you for taking my call. I am a victim of, or I should say a survivor of child abuse. Started when I was 4 years old, and this might sound crazy, but it continued until I was 23. Only because I was so scared to tell this person. Okay. I later found out that he also abused 3 of my brothers, and he had me so scared that I thought, he said he would kill my family, my brothers. So I didn't tell because I knew that nothing was going to happen to him in the court. Okay. Once I got older, put it that way. He went as far as shooting me with arrows, trying to run me over. So I was scared. I definitely agree that the death penalty is, should be awarded to, or, it should be able to, somebody should be able to prosecute with the death penalty because of all the abuse that I went through and the trauma with it. I'm still going through therapy, have been for years, and it's just, it's not right. It's, you can't help somebody that's done that. I don't believe you can. And
no, I think it's an irredeemable mistake. It's an irredeemable evil. I would agree.
And the thing is the person that did this to me and my brother knew where he was going for it. When he passed away, he didn't want a funeral. That was it. And I said, good for him, because he doesn't deserve to go to heaven. I don't know that God would have accepted him in heaven. I don't know that for sure, but I know he never asked for forgiveness. So, well,
I can't tell you how sorry I am that all of that happened to you, Diane, and I hope you're okay. I hope you're emotionally and physically as okay as you can be.
I'm okay, but I broke the cycle. I moved out of state with my kids because I didn't want this monster around my kids, and I'm very, I have always been very cautious as to who my kids are around, So I'm okay with it now that he's gone. I was scared up until I knew that he was gone, But yeah, I just think that kids are so, you got to protect your kids, and any mother that would say, oh, well, it's my brother, I don't want him to go die. I'm sorry, but he's evil. And
yeah, I don't know. Maybe there are those mothers out there. I try not to judge it because you're putting yourself in a position. Thank you, Diane, for the call. Trying to judge the decision-making on the part of somebody that happened to. I have a hard time doing that, but I also have a hard time believing that any mother would not want the ultimate punishment for these individuals. By the way, I am well familiar with the fact that the United States Supreme Court has spoken on this, and William Lamberth is as well, and we will ask William about that. Kennedy versus Louisiana was decided in 2008. In Kennedy versus Louisiana, it was determined by the United States Supreme Court that the death penalty is used exclusively for the crime of murder. Matter of fact, I can read from the decision here. Former U.S. Justice or Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, writing for the majority, said, as it relates to crimes against individuals, the death penalty should not be expanded to instances where the victim's life was not taken. The U.S. Supreme Court offered this ruling in June of 2008. The decision struck down a Louisiana law that permitted imposition of the death penalty for a rape of a child under the age of 12, similar to the legislation William Lamberth is proposing. William Lamberth is well versed on this decision, and I believe he'll have an answer for you coming up in about 10 minutes or so as to what it would mean for the state of Tennessee. It will be challenged in court constitutionally, but much like Roe v. Wade, sometimes the Supreme Court says one thing during one period of time and says another thing during another period of time. Rebecca's in Nashville real quick. Hey, Rebecca, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for my call. I just wanted to say that I believe that the death penalty should be on the table because the victim has to suffer the rest of their lives. I don't care how much counseling you have, that stays with you the rest of your life. And as long as the perpetrator is alive, you always wonder in the back of your mind if it is going to happen again. And it is not fair that the perpetrator can get to live out their lives and not pay anything when the victim is the one who has to pay the punishment. And I don't understand some of these judges, like you just mentioned about the Supreme Court, in consideration. And the victims who have been killed, they're out of their pain. But the victims who are still alive, they live with it every day. There's not a day that goes by that they do not live with it. And I don't care how many years you are talking about. And that's all I have to say on it. I just think that the death penalty, and if they don't want to do the death penalty, they could at least do chemical castration.
Well, I would agree with you there, too, because I think it's an irredeemable evil inside of these people. Thank you, Rebecca, for the call. Only 6 states have laws on the books that would offer the opportunity to consider the death penalty statute for the rape of a child. I'll tell you which states those are in a moment. Continue to take your telephone calls on this subject. It is 1:23 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. One of these days, I'm going to write a jingle for Your Health Plan Man. Your Health Plan Man! YourHealthPlanMan.com. Your Health Plan Man and YourHealthPlanMan.com are here to offer you some freedoms, freedom of choice with regard to your medical care, your health care. If you're enrolled in a plan and you don't like it, I want you to think about the freedom of choice plan from Your Health Plan Man and YourHealthPlanMan.com. If you're currently paying your own health insurance, if you're on COBRA, if you're uninsured, call Pat Davis and his team. He wants you to know first and foremost that he has options available for you. He shops around. He is not locked down or locked in to one particular health plan or of coverage. He can shop from different plans and different programs and different companies and find the best for you. That's pretty nice. Plus, he wants you to know that you don't have to wait to, quote, open enroll in anything. Call YourHealthPlanMan.com right now at 855-4PLAN-MAN, 855-4PLAN-MAN to find out more, or go to YourHealthPlanMan.com. If you're under 65, reasonably healthy, and don't need maternity coverage, you can save 30 to 60% off of Obamacare, which is supposedly the lowest cost around. And you get yourself the freedom of knowing that you control your health care. It's managed by you. It's not managed by the government. So call today at 855-475-2662 or go to YourHealthPlanMan.com. Call Pat Davis today, YourHealthPlanMan.com. Super Talk 99.7 WTN 127. Glad to have you with us on this Wednesday edition. Coming up in a couple of minutes, Representative William Lamberth will talk about House Bill 1663 that got past Judicial Subcommittee, Criminal Justice Subcommittee. The only nay vote was Gloria Johnson, who made some sort of convoluted argument. This is the bill that we've been discussing. We've got many of you on the phones that want to talk about it, that will offer up the possibility of death for child rapist, a rapist of a child under the age of 12. Now, that is currently, per the United States Supreme Court, unconstitutional. They have stated in 2008 that it violates the Eighth Amendment against extreme or unusual punishment. That said, the idea, and I'll let William explain it to you, is that you get this on the books, you put it in the court system, and you question the court, this court, not that court 15 years ago, this court, as to whether or not that was wrongly decided, and in the most egregious of circumstances, if the death penalty should be on the table. We're not unique in this. Texas, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Montana, Louisiana, and Georgia are the 6 states. Is that 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? The 6 states that have laws on the books that are currently not applied, and no prosecutor attempts to do this because the Supreme Court spoke in 2008 on the matter. It was a case involving the state of Louisiana. So all of that to say, I appreciate your telephone calls on the matter. We'll also get to the Chris Young story in just a moment, which the new video, and I'll give credit where due, Nick Barris of News Channel 5 here in town got the video from the doghouse. So you know where Chris Young lives, by the way, Belke? He lives right over there at the that Rhythm condominium, right across the street.
Oh, and he's a friend of yours?
He is not a friend of mine.
Oh, I thought you said you were friends with him.
I wish I was friends with him. I
Well,
want to
he
be
needs to
friends.
come over and hang out.
No, he's a friend of the show in the sense that he is a good friend with the Charlie Daniels Journey Home Project, and he has done some great things with that organization, with David and Charlie before he passed away, and now he's kind of an ambassador for the Charlie Daniels Journey Home Project.
He's 350 feet away. He needs to come visit.
I know he does need to come by and see us. He's over there at the Rhythm condominiums. Well, he goes down to the Tin Roof quite a bit, and he goes to the doghouse quite a bit. There's a great story involving him at the doghouse, questioning why people were asking for his identification. He was at Tin Roof. Here's the story. He was at Tin Roof, real quick. Tin Roof. These plainclothes guys come in and started asking people for ID. They took a photograph of Chris Young's ID. And then they left. And they asked a number of people for their identification, and he noticed that they took a photograph of his identification. And they identified themselves, but they had no badges or anything like that on them.
So they just said, we're cops.
We're from the ABC board. We need to see your ID. We're doing an ID check.
No ID from them.
Right. So they left Tin Roof and went next door to the doghouse. Well, Chris Young started thinking about it and was like, I don't know who these people are. So he went to the doghouse, and the video shows he's standing there, and the guy walks by him, and he puts his hand on the guy's shoulder as if to say, hey, man, I have a question for you. As soon as he touches the guy throws him to the ground. And this is why people are suspicious of cops. And I will support the police more than anybody that you'll ever hear on radio until they do crap wrong. So the reason people have suspicions about police officers is the way that this guy reported what happened. We now have video of what happened, so we get to see it. The way he reported it is that Chris Young assaulted him. Which, if you watch the video, you know is a load of garbage.
And he has every right to ask for identification. If you claim to be a police officer.
Yeah, I just need to. Yeah, if you're plain clothes, just show me who you are. Just tell me who you are. Just show me your ID, and we're good. And that's what he wanted. I was about to transition from piece of garbage to Cameron Smith, and I was very excited about how to do that. Bell broke it up.
That's hurtful. Like,
hello.
Why do you hurt me that way?
How are you?
I'm good.
Just
nice to see you.
Broke it up.
Feel like I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, I've been running all over the place, man. I was just over at Belmont Law.
You got a nice haircut.
It's special.
Yeah. I did this once before. I asked you where you got your haircut because I wanted it to be a place that I could go, and then you tell me it's this.
It was everywhere was iced
there.
over. My gym ultimately has a spa in it, and they were open, and she did a freaking fantastic job.
You got your haircut at your gym?
Yeah, man. It's not like getting your hair cut at Walmart. It's like special good.
Oh, I would go to Walmart before I would go to your gym.
I went to Walmart one time, and there was a haircut place in this Walmart, and I said, okay, this is a good deal. I'm here. I'll get it done. And then she's like, okay. And I'm like, are you done? And she was done. And, oh, buddy, it was the worst haircut I ever had. It was just looks like somebody chopped up my hair with like a blender.
Yeah, I think maybe you should have been able to see that coming.
Yeah, probably.
I want to ask you about your thoughts on 1663. Before I do, I want to get back to a few calls on it and catch you up to speed as to what we're doing. Danny is next up in the borough. Danny, thank you for your call. Good afternoon. Welcome into the Matt Murphy Show.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate you taking the time for the call. So I'm a survivor of childhood rape myself. The consequences of this crime have never really aligned, in my opinion, with the severity of the evil involved in it. But I would argue this to folks who are pushing back against this. I for one am not, but it's not in a vindictive nature that I say that. My question is to them is simply this: why take that specific arrow out of the quiver of prosecutors? No one's mandating that it's going to be dictated that someone has to be charged, with the death penalty if this is the crime. It's just an opportunity for prosecutors to say, hey, this is particularly bad and we should have this on the table. I guess I just don't understand why folks would lament that opportunity to take care of the most evil people inside of our society. It makes no sense to me. And the argument of mothers not wanting to rat out their brothers and whatnot this is the same nonsense argument that's been thrown at us from abortion advocates for years who want to talk about rape and incest. Those make up less than 1% of all of those circumstances. Why take a wild scenario like that will likely never be seen in fruition and try and take something as meaningful as this off of the entire table for prosecutors statewide? Why go to the defense of child rapists in that regard?
Danny, you said that you said you're a victim yourself?
Correct, sir.
I want to put you on hold because I want to ask Bell K to get some off-air information from you, Danny, because I think our next guest might want to talk to you about the possibility. I don't know. I don't want to put thoughts in his head or words in his mouth, but I would imagine that Representative Lamberth would love to hear from people like you who have been victims, who would be willing to testify about the possibility and the efficacy of a piece of legislation like this. 135 Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Hey, friends, it's Matt Murphy, and allow me a moment to help you with those financial situations that you get confused by. I know I get confused by them, but I don't need to be confused any longer because I know the guy. His name is Paul Winkler. Paul Winkler is the man with the plan, and he's going to give you knowledge, as he's done with me, about the financial world. I love his approach to planning and investment. Nothing's done on commission at Paul Winkler. They are big on education at Paul Winkler. Two reasons for that. One, commission incentivizes them to do things that help them, not necessarily you, so they don't do it over at Paul Winkler. Number two, they're big on education when it comes to making sure that you understand the whys of investment. He believes that you worry less when you know what you're doing and you know why you're doing it. That investment education is evidence-based. It's backed by Nobel Prize-winning research. Friends, you know me, and you know that I would not pitch you something that I don't fully believe in, and I believe in Paul Winkler. Now, I'm also paid to do this ad. The government asks that I tell you that, and that's all well and good. Bottom line is this: the number one go-to guy in the state of Tennessee, 10 separate offices to serve you, been around for a long, long time, Paul Winkler. PaulWinkler.com or 615-851-1950. 615-851-1950. Call Paul Winkler today. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. It's 1:40. Cameron Smith in studio with us, anticipating an hour with Mr. Smith. I want to find out, many of the listening audience, many have already asked how New Hampshire was for you because they expected that you were up there campaigning.
It's a long drive back from New Hampshire.
All night, huh?
You know, and what's interesting for me is Nikki Haley behaving like she won when she really lost. It'd be super weird if there were a candidate who did that.
Yeah.
It would be awkward.
More on that in a moment. Let's not troll the audience just yet. Let's wait on that. Representative William Lamberth, House Majority Leader, is with us to talk about HB 1663 that we've been discussing for the better part of the show today. Representative, thank you for being on with us. I appreciate your time. I know it's very valuable. Hello, sir.
Hey, Matt, how are you guys doing today? Thank you for covering this important topic. We deeply appreciate it.
Well, it's obvious that most in the General Assembly are in agreement with you that the state of Tennessee needs to make a stand and a statement regarding child rape and what we do to child rapists in the state of Tennessee. I'll just start here because I think I've fairly described the legislation and what you're trying to accomplish. Obviously, there is Supreme Court precedent that goes against the idea of presenting the death penalty as an appropriate punishment for someone that does not commit murder. Talk to me about that aspect of this and what you are hoping to accomplish with this legislation.
Yeah, Matt, thank you very much. And look, this is only reserved for the worst of the worst criminals out there. This is reserved for those monsters that have been convicted of raping a child. The state has proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And not only have they been convicted of that crime, but a jury looks at their criminal history. They look at the aggravating factors of whether or not there were multiple victims, whether or not there were particularly heinous aspects to that crime. And then the jury, under this legislation, would be given the option to decide whether or not that person, because of their horrendous actions, should forfeit their own life. It's their actions that have created this havoc and mayhem and heartbreak for their victims, and so it's their actions that a jury would be judging. Now, when the U.S. Supreme Court found that this would not be an option and that the states would not have the option to have this penalty applied to these, again, monsters, part of their reasoning is that not enough states had this law in the books, and thus somehow or another the country had moved on from this, and that the death penalty should not be applied because enough states didn't think it should. Well, the 10th Amendment would say that we have the choice here in Tennessee. We as Tennesseans get to decide what the criminal penalties are for the criminal offenses that are in our code. And that's all we're asking. And I've talked to the Attorney General about this. I've talked to several extremely competent and good attorneys. And I don't want to speak for the Attorney General, but I will say several of my friends that are attorneys, as I am, believe that this court, this current U.S. Supreme Court, is much more 10th Amendment friendly. It is much more states' rights friendly. And that's all we're asking them to do, is that if this passes law in Tennessee, is for them to take the shackles off and allow us as Tennesseans to decide how we would punish these heinous criminals.
So you're well aware that this, I mean, it seems to me to be part of the point that you want to trigger some action in the courts, and you are prepared for that action moving forward to attempt to get a new decision or a revisit to this situation on the part of the Supreme Court?
We are absolutely ready to fight this all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. If we save even one child from being raped by some monster out there, because they know that if this passes and if it withstands any scrutiny in the courts, that they will die if they rape a child in the state of Tennessee. And again, those aggravating factors are found by the jury. If that saves children from having this happen to them, it is absolutely worth every step of the fight, every amount of money that would go into that fight, and hopefully would set new precedent that states are the ones and the citizens of each state get to determine how we punish criminals and how we pursue justice within our state.
Representative William Lamberth on with us for a few moments talking about HB 1663, which just passed the Criminal Justice Subcommittee yesterday. Cameron Smith is with us, William, and he's got a question for you.
So how do you deal with the proportionality argument? That's a legal argument that you're going to have to overcome at the Supreme Court that says, well, the death penalty is the most extreme form of punishment. These crimes are heinous and awful and terrible, but they do not result in the death, the physical death of a child. So that's going to be one of the central questions that you have to overcome. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, Cameron, thank you for asking that question. The way you respond to that is that you spend time with survivors of these heinous crimes. You talk to many of the victims that I have spoken to over the last almost 20 years of practicing law, both as a former prosecutor and current, just private practitioner. There are some fates that are worse than death. These survivors, these strong, amazing people who have been able to move through their life after these horrendous acts have happened to them, many times when they were just young children, and many times by those that they love and who are supposed to be there to protect them, who have abused them. Talk to these survivors, talk to these individuals that have a strength that many of us cannot even understand. And you will understand that from a proportional standpoint, it absolutely is appropriate that these monsters that commit these type of crimes should be put to death. They should not be able to live amongst us and be a risk to additional people out there and additional children if they are ever released. It is absolutely a proportional punishment for a horrendous crime that, again, quite frankly, is worse than death.
The one individual in the subcommittee that took some exception with this and ultimately voted against moving it out of subcommittee was Representative Gloria Johnson. We listened to her commentary, her justification. I think it's I don't think it's a very good argument that she's making, but I just want to give you, unencumbered by my commentary, to respond to Gloria Johnson's argument that you're going to cause a chilling effect and prevent victims from coming forward as a result of the death penalty being on the table for child rapists. How do you respond to that, William?
Yes, obviously I disagree with that, but the chilling effect that we are seeking here is a chilling effect on these type of crimes ever occurring to begin with. And when you talk to those that are helping to guide children and adults that have been abused by some of these monsters through both the criminal justice system and then through therapy and treatment and through their lives even beyond, you will get an extremely mixed bag of responses on how both those treatment professionals and survivors of these heinous crimes on how they feel about a punishment of this nature. This is a decision for all Tennesseans to make through their elected representatives. This is a policy consideration on what we feel like as a state the punishment should be for that type of heinous crime. In the 7 years that I was an assistant district attorney, I never looked at a victim of crime and a survivor of crime and said, hey, what do you want to happen to that defendant? It was the state of Tennessee versus that individual. It's the state's job to prosecute that person. It's not a civil suit. It's not that survivor versus that defendant. They are a critical part of this process, and their opinions and guidance should always be a part of it. That it is the state of Tennessee who is responsible for pursuing justice, not vengeance, but justice, and for both preventing these type of crimes and punishing those who have committed them.
I don't know that I believe these examples exist in the state of Tennessee that Gloria Johnson was bringing up, but I even went so far as to grant her that even if you could find a one-off example of a witness to a crime or someone that needed to testify against a family member, for example, then that might be the one-off that you downshift to life in prison on, if that is what it takes to get a prosecution and get the witness on the stand. But the point is that I think you've well made is give the prosecution the opportunity to opt for the death penalty in the most egregious, heinous, disgusting cases that come before the courts.
Absolutely, 100%. And look, if somebody is against the death penalty, if they, for some reason, feel that some disgusting pedophile should not be put to death for their crimes, then that's fine. That's their vote. I'm not going to chastise anybody else for their vote. They represent their district, and they have to vote their district and their conscience. But for me, in representing the people of Sumner County and people throughout the state of Tennessee, I have had an overwhelming response from average everyday citizens that have emailed in, that have commented on social media, that have called and texted me, and many of which who are survivors of child sexual assaults and have said, thank you for carrying this bill. And they feel like that this is an appropriate punishment for those few that are the worst of the worst, the most heinous individuals out there that have committed these crimes. And again, this decision on whether or not the death penalty would be applied would only be decided by a jury after they have decided guilt or innocence. It is only after that time in a bifurcated process that then they would look at the aggravated factors to decide whether or not, this penalty would be provided. We are simply adding it as a potential option.
This conversation about 1663 has opened up a broader question, and I want to pose it to you in the minute or so that we have left because I know you're very busy, Representative. How do we speed up death penalty cases and ultimately the appellate process within the death penalty? Because many believe in the state of Tennessee, as I'm receiving this today as we discuss it, that the process takes so long, it takes away that deterrence factor that you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation. How can we, is there a way for the General Assembly to help speed up the judicial process in that regard?
So justice delayed is definitely justice denied. But I will say, when we are talking about the state killing one of our citizens, even someone who has committed a heinous crime, we do need to make sure that there is never an instance where we are putting someone to death who is innocent. We do need to make sure that we have checked every box, that we have crossed every T, dotted every I. It is critical that we make sure that full due process is exercised. Now, I will tell you, Matt, there are ways that we can speed up that process and still keep those protections in place. For instance, a few years ago, I carried successfully a bill that took the Criminal Court of Appeals out of the process. Every single case was going from trial to the Criminal Court of Appeals and to the Tennessee Supreme Court. Neither the state nor the defendant were ever just kind of taking the Criminal Court of Appeals decision and just going home. I mean, it was always going to the Tennessee Supreme Court. And the Criminal Court of Appeals process was taking a year, 18 months, 2 years for those cases and just stretching it out. So I carried a bill, and it's law now, that says these cases go straight from trial to the Tennessee Supreme Court for appeal. There is no intermediary step. If they did that on the federal level and all of these went from trial to the U.S. Supreme Court, it would cut years, if not decades, out of this process. These are the most important cases that are coming through the judiciary. There's no reason why it should have to hit every one of those intermediary courts and have to wait in each one take these cases straight up to the Tennessee Supreme Court, which is what we've done here. And I would hope that our federal counterparts would look at potentially just taking these cases straight to the U.S. Supreme Court and battling those issues out there. I mean, it would cut years at least out of this process, because that's exactly what it did here at the state level. Now, that's beyond my purview as a state representative, but I hope what we've already done here in Tennessee sets a good example for what they could do at the federal level if they chose to, and still keep every single protection in place that is in place right now.
William, thank you for your time. Thank you for the bill itself. You get a lot of support from our listening audience, and I want you to know that. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Cameron. Good to talk to you guys.
All right, take care. There's Representative William Lamberth, also the House Majority Leader, presenting his bill, 1663. 52 after the hour. We'll reflect on that, get more of your telephone calls in here in a moment. It is the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk. Hey, friends, it's Matt Murphy. Defense Systems is on my mind. You know, I don't know if they're still looking for a person to employ in their public relations and marketing department, but they have been. You can find out more by going to defensesystems.com. That's defensesystems.com. I've been talking about this. They're looking for the right person. They are growing as a business. Why? Because, sadly, the world is a dangerous place. And hope is not an option. Hope is not a plan, I should say. If you are the decision maker in a business, if you're the decision maker at a church or a school, if you make decisions anywhere people gather, listen up, because Brink Fiddler wants to talk with you about your facility, about active shooter response, about workplace violence, about rapid response medical training, all customized to your facility, all designed to help improve the safety and security of your people and your facility. That's what it's all about. Once again, I like to say hope is not a plan. It's a dangerous world. It's time to get trained, and get trained with the best at Defend Systems. They've trained schools, they train employees in big businesses, and they can help you as well. As a matter of fact, we got our training done a couple of years ago right here at Cumulus Nashville, and I think it's time for us to re-up that training. DefenseSystems.com, that's DefenseSystems.com, 615-236-6484, 236-6484 for Defense Systems.
2 o'clock, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. Currently 57 degrees, cloudy and a rainy day yet again in Music City. Portion of Middle Tennessee in a flood watch starting and right now until tomorrow afternoon due to the excessive rainfall, which would cause lower lying streams and creeks to rise. Counties affected: Bedford, Coffee, Giles, Grundy, Lawrence, Lewis, Marshall, Murray, Perry, Van Buren, Warren, and Wayne counties. Got a forecast coming up in about 2 minutes. A major milestone for the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. Here's Karen Travers.
President Biden announced Wednesday a record-breaking 21.3 million people signed up for health care coverage through the Affordable Care Act. The White House says since the president took office, 9 million more people have coverage through healthcare.gov. And through the American Rescue Plan and the Inflation Reduction Act, healthcare premiums for millions of Americans with Obamacare coverage are lower by an average of $800 annually through next year. Former President Trump on the campaign trail continues to promise to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, calling it a, quote, catastrophe.
Right now in Tennessee, a car ended up in the bottom of a ravine in Clarksville after a crash today. It was on the 41A bypass near Ashland City Road. That vehicle was able to get removed. The road reopened. Officials say the driver's injuries don't look to be life-threatening. Boeing CEO's itinerary. Dave Calhoun, head of the aircraft manufacturer, on Capitol Hill today, answering questions about the faulty door plug blowout earlier this month that caused the grounding of all 737 MAX 9s worldwide. Jay O'Brien says Calhoun is meeting with Senators Ted Cruz, Mark Warner, and Maria Cantwell, who is chair of the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee.
She has already indicated she's interested in looking at what went wrong here with Boeing potentially holding a potential hearing. She's also already sent a letter to the FAA asking them about their inspections of the Boeing production plant and what they can provide as any evidence on that front. Their deadline, by the way, to give her that information is tomorrow.
And that is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
All right, folks, so let's talk to you guys in the listening audience. Maybe you're like me, you're about 50 years old, and maybe you've noticed a lack of energy, motivation, or drive. And maybe like some guys, as a matter of fact, it's about half the guys in the listening audience, at some time or another, you'll also notice that this lack of motivation, it carries over into the bedroom. And that's what I'll say about that. You know what I'm talking about, guys. There's no shame in this game. Let's get it handled. Let's get something done about it through the Tennessee Men's Clinic. And they've been doing it for a long time. Since 2014, they've been assisting people just like you get back to life with energy, with vitality again, through the Tennessee Men's Clinic. They'll bring you in. They'll check those numbers. They'll see what they can see. They'll diagnose you. They are experts in this field, and then they'll get to business solving this issue and getting you back to life, getting you back to energetic life. 615-208-9090, 615-208-9090. Call today. Find out more at TennesseeMen'sClinic.com. That's TennesseeMen'sClinic.com. Tell them that I sent you to the one and only Tennessee Men's Clinic. Hello, it's Super Talk 99.7 WTN. My name is Matt Murphy, and I'm proud you've decided to join us for a little bit of time. Whatever time you're able to give us, we're certainly appreciative of it, whether it's 5 or so minutes or the full 3 hours. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We've got Cameron Smith with us, as usual, on this Wednesday edition, January 24th. It's 498 episodes in now on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Many of you wishing to opine regarding the death penalty and House Bill 1663. We'll get to you in just a moment. Right after we diagnose with Cameron Smith what he thinks last night in New Hampshire means he will explain it all to us.
Right now.
Right now. Hello.
Let's go.
So, big win.
Yeah.
You know, I don't remember a time in my life. Maybe there's one that I'm blanking on where a non-incumbent seems to have wrapped things up as early as Trump has. And I think it's partially because many, many people within the Republican Party, many people, Trump supporters, they don't look at him that way because he's already served once. This has not happened since,
Matt,
Grover,
60,
Cleveland?
70% of the Republican base is like, you are the incumbent because you won the last election.
Sure.
Right. So I think that's the thing that every other candidate sort of missed on is they said, well, people are kind of over Trump. He lost, so moving forward, that was DeSantis's gambit. That's Haley's gambit. And the Republican base is, call it 70%. That's like, no, we're good. This was our guy.
Do you believe that Nikki Haley actually sees a window? Does she have people around her that are describing to her a window of opportunity here? Or is she hanging around on the possibility that Donald Trump has some sort of criminal issue down the road that somehow derails his candidacy?
So I think if Republicans were smart, they would just say, hey, just stay in. And as a fallback option type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that she's playing that. My guess is that she goes to South Carolina, gets her butt kicked in her home state, and calls it quits there. That's kind of my gut reaction.
That's my feeling too.
Well, it's New Hampshire. This isn't really my home. But if she could not, if she had been like 2 points down or something in New Hampshire, but even then, it's like that's the state you should really win versus Trump.
Yeah, New Hampshire is a bunch of weirdos.
Well, New Hampshire is a great sort of, if you look at New Hampshire as a microcosm of the nation, because you got swing voters, a lot of those independents there, they don't exist in South Carolina like they do in New Hampshire.
Right.
And so if she can't close there, the South Carolina and then the rest of the South, she's not going to do well there.
It also doesn't do her any favors with the Republican base that you have people on #NeverCNN and MSNBC saying, oh, yeah, I'm normally a Democrat. I switched over because we didn't really have a primary. I voted for Nikki Haley just to dispatch of Trump. I'm not voting for her in the general election if it were to come to that, which happened last night on national television.
I think the big takeaway for me that's very concerning for Trump is he's got to pivot from his base that he's got to the Haley voters and say, hey, I need you to roll with me. Like, I know I'm not your man. I know you don't think I'm great, but I need you to roll with me so we can beat Joe Biden. Because if they don't, he loses. And he needs them very much so. So I do think Haley's out, but then he's got to play nice. And that's not his jam because he wants loyalty. And I'm telling you, that 20% or so that's in Haley land is never going to bend the knee to him like Tim Scott did. They're not going to play that game. They might hold their nose and vote for him, but he's got to ask nicely.
What's the big difference between a Nikki Haley supporter and a Tim Scott supporter, you think?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
I mean, they're from the same state.
I think what's left is the way I would characterize it because I don't think anybody.
I mean, I don't mean to answer my own question, but I don't mean to interrupt you either.
No, go ahead.
I mean, it's a bunch of never Trumpers.
Yeah, it's folks that say Trump's not my guy. And so he needs them to win the general election. And he's got to figure out how do he doesn't need
the choice becomes binary at that point, right? It's Biden or Trump.
Yeah, but we've done this for a long time, right? It's, well, if you don't, America dies. If you don't, and what happens is if those people stay at home.
Look at what's happening at the southern border. Isn't that enough demonstration that it's real?
Massive drive. I think that does. I think that's what, frankly, makes Trump competitive here is between inflation and the border, it's Biden. And they're already pivoting to making this about Trump. They've already, you've seen some of the Never Trump types. You've seen that the media must save us from Trump now. What do you think they're going to do? It will be Trump on a loop, nonstop through the general.
Yeah, the Democrats will run against Trump and they'll run against Dobbs. Those are the two issues that they'll run on because they think they can collect middle-aged women on the abortion issue. And they can collect Never Trumpers on the Trump is bad issue, Orange Man.
And Trump keeps saying stupid stuff that helps them. Like, for example, on this immunity stuff, being like, well, sometimes you have a rogue cop and you just got to deal with that. And that's how presidential immunity works. I'm like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And they're going to put that on an ad on a loop.
Well, there's plenty of dumb things that,
right.
Joe Biden says that, women with benefits or whatever the hell he was talking about last night. I believe that, thank you, Joe. I believe that Trump can do it, and I think he did it at the Fox News town hall. Before DeSantis left, when he did his town hall, I thought he was as focused as I've seen him in a long time, and it excited me. And it's because he was on issues. He had 4 issues.
Yes.
If he sticks with economy, energy, border, and no foreign wars, I think that's a winning strategy for him. But that's what he has to do. Don't get caught up in the Nikki Haley nonsense. And I thought his answer the other day was pretty good. When he was asked again about, do you think Nikki should drive? He's like, I don't care.
Right.
And that's appropriate.
And that's great.
I don't care.
But to call her Nimbra, I'm like, what are you doing, dude? That's
his thing. He
so
nicknames
weird.
People.
And he's like, some say I'm so good at I'm like, who are you?
I don't believe that he ever thought Ron DeSantis was that much of a threat because he never bothered to give him a real good nickname.
The Sanctimonious.
It wasn't real good.
It wasn't good.
It wasn't that good, and he retired it.
I like Fancy Shoes, though.
Fancy Shoes was going to be great.
And I know there are a lot of Ron DeSantis supporters out there who are like, he's going to make no, he's not. He's a terrible candidate. He's a good governor of Florida. He's a conservative. I love the guy from a policy standpoint.
You don't think he can come back?
No. Because we live in an era we have now seen Trump, and for all Trump's flaws and all the things that drive me insane, he is entertaining and engaging. Like, he'll just chill out and talk and go on a riff, and he's very authentic, and people demand and like that, and Ron DeSantis can't even smile normally.
Right.
I mean, he can't do that. And even if you like DeSantis, you got to admit that. And so I don't think he's got a future. Haley is interesting, but I think she's so, I think all the Trump minions, if you will, like Christie and Pence and Haley, are all sort of like, well, why would we go with you if you were just kind of an underling to the guy who's still here? And, even if Trump loses, I think the next person that comes has to be sort of independent of Trump. It can't be a Trump patsy or something, or he's just the one in charge, period.
In his circle. You can't find somebody in his circle down the road.
Right.
I would hope that Ron DeSantis has the ability to overcome some of the personality issues, but I see what you're saying. I think he's a good governor. I think he's a good conservative.
Yes, both true.
But he has been a horrible candidate.
His wife's a better candidate than him.
And I think it's because he's had it drilled into him that you have to act a certain way. And so you see it. At least I feel like I see it, where if he's asked a certain thing, if someone tries to be funny with him, I remember doing this with the governor of the state of Alabama, Kay Ivey, where I would have conversations with Kay Ivey on air, and I would make a joke and say something that's obviously funny and see her calculate in her head whether what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to accomplish, am I trying to get her in some way, what's happening right now, what am I? And there's this lag of about 5 seconds before there's any hint of a smile or a laugh.
Right.
And I feel that way with Ron DeSantis. Like like there's a machine somewhere going, okay, what am I supposed to do here? That was a sarcastic joke. Laugh. Ha, ha, ha.
Right. And at the entire field, there's one candidate who's authentic. It's Donald Trump. And that's coming from me. This guy has changed the game in many respects because whether you like him or not, you're not going to say he isn't who he is. You may not like who he is, but there's no he's not like, well, what did Ron do? Now I'm going to behave a certain way. Oh, Nikki, she's saying this. He rolls with it. Everybody else is trying to figure out, how do I respond to him? And so I don't know why you would get excited about somebody else who's trying to figure out how to respond to the lead dog.
And Jason writes in and says Ron was a worse candidate than Ted Cruz. I agree.
Yes.
And Ted Cruz was I love Ted Cruz, and Ted Cruz was a bad candidate. Ron was worse than him.
Yeah, Ted's
because
terrible.
he also never knew what he wanted to do, and he wanted to kind of be like Trump, but also go after Trump.
You cannot hug fight Trump. Like that's what the field tried to do.
Why would I vote for? I mean, and I don't believe that Vivek was ever running for president.
No.
I think he was running for a position in Trump's cabinet or perhaps vice president. But why would I vote for Vivek? Trump's still alive, right? I mean, why would I
have a candidate telling me Donald Trump is the greatest president ever? You should support me instead. You guys are idiots.
What?
And the only one that consistently tried to bludgeon Trump was Chris Christie, and nobody listened to him because they're like, remember when you kissed the ring and you were Trump's purse boy? Do you remember that?
And everyone knew that he was just in the race to trash Trump.
And it's so sad for Chris Christie because he's now been replaced by Tim Scott. And, Donald Trump did his job and emasculated Tim Scott on stage saying, hey, and you, didn't Nikki Haley appoint you? Man, you must really hate her to support me. And he's like awkwardly giggling. And then he comes up to the mic. He's like, no, I love you. And it was so sad. And I will never, ever, ever support Tim Scott ever again.
Why not?
Because
maybe he just likes Trump.
When any politician just emasculates you that way.
I don't understand how that's emasculating. Sincerely.
Really?
Well, Donald Trump pointed out the fact that he has the support of Tim Scott above the person that appointed him to be United States Senator. That's Trump promoting Trump. Like,
right.
How awesome am I that this guy supports me? I don't understand how that's emasculating. I really don't.
Yeah, it's the same way that Chris Christie was, that it's very clearly, I vanquished you. Now you sit here and I sort of drag you along. And
Tim Scott wants to be vice president.
I agree.
You don't get to be vice president by trashing Trump.
I'm not asking to trash. It's stand and say, hey, I picked you because I like your policies and you're going to win. The whole hey, you must really hate her. And then he's, but I love you so much. That was a bit much for me. Maybe I read that wrong.
I don't think that people in Donald Trump's orbit get very far with Donald Trump by deciding, hey, I'm going to publicly go against Donald Trump. I don't think that's the way
you don't do that. But my point is, what he has done with you see these political things.
Who's in the friendship orbit of Donald Trump that hasn't been emasculated, in your opinion?
None, other than his kids.
Right, because Donald Trump doesn't put up with other alpha males.
Yes, which is my point. That, if you want to be sort of the, sniveling one behind, that's cool, but I'm not going to back you. I would back him way before I would back Tim Scott again because I see that. And the American people see that, too. They're like, that's the lead dog. All you other guys, y'all are table scraps type dogs. And
well, that's
what's happening.
When we were talking about vice president and I asked, the open-ended, who do you think? And several people mentioned Rand Paul. And these are my libertarian friends, and I get it. And I would be predisposed to love that, but I think Rand Paul's too much of his own man.
Yes.
And Donald Trump's not going to put up with that.
No, you know who's going to be Donald Trump's vice president? Irrelevant.
Yeah, probably.
Because
but most vice presidents are.
Well, historically, it's been sort of the heir apparent, right?
Right.
This is the one, and I don't know what Joe Biden was thinking, but historically, that's been the game plan, right? I'm the president, the vice president is teed up to be the party's sort of next standard bearer. Donald Trump doesn't like that.
No, Joe Biden decided to go for an insurance policy as opposed to the standard bearer.
It's a bad insurance policy. It's something. True. It's awful. I mean, but you get the idea. Donald Trump wants somebody that's like, yes, and you're great. Please, may I have another? That type of mindset. That, to me, is fine. That's his prerogative. But I don't look for that in a leader. And somebody who votes for Donald Trump doesn't either.
615-737-9986. Several of you holding over on the death penalty question. We'll get to you in a moment. John, Michael, and Brett. We also have the Chris Young story to tell you about. It's 219 Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Hey, 2 locations for Savory Spice, so they're well within the sound of my voice. If you are in Nashville, they're in L&L Market on Charlotte Pike. If you're down south in Franklin, they're right there off the square next to Gray's Pharmacy. Why Savory Spice? Well, we get to a certain age, friends, where you're not buying the cheapest cut of meat. You're not buying, the cheapest thing at the grocery store. You want to up your food game. You want to do that for your family, for health purposes or whatnot. And so you buy that nicer cut of steak or that salmon. Well, if you're doing that and you're putting the same old crummy, clumped up spices on it, you're not doing it the right way. You up your food game by upping your spice game. You up your spice game at Savory Spice. I talk to a lot of people that want to get into the kitchen and learn what's going on in there. You can find out a lot at Savory Spice. Go by their shop and ask about their incredible blends and recipes. They've got pre-made recipes for things like pot roast or whatever. I mean, it's just incredible. Savory Spice has them. They have them available for you. And if you're literally a chef, you shop at Savory Spice because they have the best spices going. They have the best spices around. Find out more by going by Savory Spice today. Savory Spice is located once again right off the square in Franklin. Also, L&L Market in Charlotte Pike. Say Holly, David, Matt Murphy sent me to the one and only Savory Spice.
Southern Border Manhattan District Attorney warning payment apps that you use for fraud. We'll tell you more about that. Plus, a trial over the Oxford school shooter going on today. 2:30 Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Thank you much, Mr. Morey. 2:25 right now. Cameron Smith in studio with us. Matt Murphy with you. Several of you on the phones want to talk death penalty, and let's do it. 615-737-9986. There's been a proposal before the Tennessee General Assembly, 1663, look that thing up, that would provide an opportunity for prosecutors to ask for the death penalty in the most egregious cases of child rape. Michael, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I heard your caller in an earlier segment, and she really is reflecting the sentiments of many, many people, perhaps tens of thousands. I'd like to add one thing to what she said. Remember, think of it this way. If you are a victim of murder, you don't have the rest of your life to suffer. If you're a victim of rape, that's a different story. My wife, back in the 90s, was raped. And, of course, it affects her, but it affects me, and it affects a lot of people. She has been in the psychiatric ward twice. She's on a cocktail of medications, and it took a long time to find that right cocktail. Rape is a different kind of crime. And we learned that the hard way.
How's your wife doing?
She's doing okay. I mean, there are a lot of footnotes to that short answer.
I bet.
But
how are you doing?
I'm doing okay as well. And I try to resist. I mean, I applaud this legislation. I hope it goes through because, as the other lady who called in said, it's arguably a worse crime. And I just explained why, at least one reason why. And we're doing okay, but we still have nightmares. And you also had a caller who said he's a follower of Jesus, as am I. So I do believe in the rule of law. If we didn't have the rule of law, well, let's just say I have a very creative mind. And she was generous by saying chemical castration. Mine would involve something else.
I bet.
But yeah, but it's a different kind of crime. It is arguably worse.
Would you support the expansion of the death penalty to all rapes, or is it specifically unique to children? I mean, because I agree with you that the effects are long lasting. You can't argue that those type of crimes, particularly rape, has lasting, lifelong impacts, and in literally,
you really are taking a life in a certain way.
You're taking the life they had before that crime, and it is no longer there. You have another life. It doesn't mean that it's horrible, but man, they're a lot more. It's complicated.
I mean, Michael knows far more than I ever will, right, Michael?
And so, would you support that expansion?
Well, I've learned not to react in knee jerks. I've gotten myself into trouble for that.
Sure.
But that's a very good question. I have to think about that. I will say, perhaps off the top of my head, that we have involuntary manslaughter. We have lying in wait. We have the different levels for murder. Perhaps we can have the same thing when it comes to rape, and especially child rape. I also know some victims of child rape right here in Middle Tennessee, and it was on the news a few years back. I would say if it's not the death penalty, where, as you said, all of your T's are crossed and your I's were dotted, and you made sure that you had the right guy and the right crime.
Right.
But then, and then different, perhaps different levels. I don't know. You know what? I'm going to have to think about this, because we do have different levels for killing. Negligent homicide, for instance. Well, you don't negligently rape somebody.
Right.
You plan it out. You lie in wait.
Well, I mean, we do have, under the law, we do make a distinction between, for example, a 20-year-old having a consensual sexual relationship with a 15-year-old. We call that statutory rape.
Right.
So there are some distinctions. And, you know, I understand what Cameron's asking is that if we're going down this road, what's the difference between a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old when we're talking about these types of violent circumstances?
It's just time. I mean, and that's what I think that's where the court is going to get hung up here is they're going to say either we're opening the door and that means offenses that have an ongoing impact to the victim may be eligible for the death penalty. I mean, and look, I've had kids that I've cared for in my home who were abused in these ways by other people, and it's awful. It's atrocious. I've said myself, I'd kill them if I could get my hands on them. But in terms of the criminal justice system, we've got to be able to articulate the standard and explain why this particular punishment is proportional to the crime.
Have to be better than the criminals themselves as a society. Thank you. I can't, Bell, I can't hang up on him. Something's happened to my unit, so I don't know if you're able to. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael, so much for the call. Thank you. And God bless you for your willingness to share aspects of your personal story. I know that that's difficult for you. I can't imagine. I can't imagine it, and I don't want to try because it's so painful. What he's talking about is just so painful, which is why it's so easy for so many of us to say, yes, this is a road that we'll go down. You open up a door which suggests that I think you're right. The courts are going to look at this from a contrarian standpoint. They're going to say, wait a minute. If we open this door and say that individuals who have not taken a life can have their life taken as sanctioned by the state, then where does that stop? What Kennedy said in 2008 was, as it relates to crimes against individuals, the death penalty should not be expanded to instances where the victim's life was not taken. That's a hard line. It's a bright line.
It is.
And it's not such a bright line as to where we draw it if we take this step.
And the legal policy stuff is really hard here. I mean, you got to use uncomfortable words and terms and say, well, this doesn't apply to sexual assault, but it does apply to rape, and it does apply to, these different categories.
And what do we mean? And you have to define those terms.
Very clearly.
Yeah. It's 2:32, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Matt Murphy. Cameron's in with us for the final hour. We'll speak with Brian Wilson coming up, see what's happening on the drive. It's all to come. 30 more minutes to go on Super Talk.
It's 2:32. I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. 57 degrees, light rain in Middle Tennessee. Got a flood watch in portions of the mid-state until tomorrow afternoon. Weather forecast on the way in 2 minutes. As negotiations over the supplemental spending deal continue in Washington, a group of Republican senators held a press conference inside the Capitol today, blasting the initial details of a possible agreement being worked out by a bipartisan group of senators. Though the text has not yet been released, some Republican senators, including Texas's Ted Cruz, suggest they're going to be unwilling to back a deal if it involves work with the Democrats, particularly Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer.
Negotiating with Chuck Schumer on securing the border is like putting Hannibal Lecter in charge of a Go Vegan ad campaign. He might dine on your liver with a healthy side of fava beans, but it's not going to remotely do what the suggested objective is.
Fraud. The Manhattan District Attorney is warning payment apps like Venmo, Zelle, Cash App that users are vulnerable to fraud unless they incorporate more security measures like limiting transaction amounts, secondary verification, and better monitoring of unusual activity. Alvin Bragg says it's leading to an increase in violent phone jackings and pickpocketing. And a jury selection for the trial of Jennifer Crumbly, mother of the Oxford school shooter, continues at a Michigan courtroom today. Prosecutors hopeful this trial will hold the woman accountable for the unlawful negligence that resulted in their son's murder of 4 students back in 2021. Trevel Alt brings us more.
This is the first time that parents have been charged in the case of a school shooting. Basically what prosecutors have said, and I was there in the aftermath of the shooting. I've talked to the prosecutor myself. She said that she's not trying to set a precedent here about, all parents need to be held responsible for their child's behavior, but they felt the parents' behavior was so egregious here that it was criminal in nature.
And that is the latest news. Weather forecast up next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
Super Talk 99.7 WTN. A few more moments with you, and we'll hand off to the man, the myth, the legend, Brian Wilson, and The Drive coming up mere seconds from now. New developments in the criminal case against popular music artist Chris Young. We mentioned this yesterday. I didn't get into it because, frankly, I didn't know the whole story. I'm glad I did not get into this yesterday because I would have wagged my finger at Chris Young. I would have said, shame, shame. Everybody knows your name. By the way, Cameron Smith is here as well. So you just saw the video, and I'm going to ask for your analysis in just a moment. Here's the backstory. So we find out yesterday that Chris Young was arrested for disorderly conduct, amongst other charges, resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, assaulting a police officer or a peace officer. Well, in the aftermath of the Monday night event, News Channel 5 and Nick Barris, kudos to Barris, went to the Doghouse Saloon and got the security video and has now put the security video up on News Channel 5's website. I'll try to put it up on my socials right after the show finishes. So it's Monday night. Chris Young apparently lives, I'm told, over at the Rhythm Condominiums on DeMunbrian. He is a regular at the Tin Roof. Okay. Well, okay. Go down, be with the regular. I mean, which, by the way, I think that's pretty cool. I mean, now everybody will flock over there. But if you knew that, you're kind of like in the club. Right? Oh, Chris Young comes in here and drinks, and we leave him alone. So Monday night, he's at Tin Roof. He drinks at Tin Roof. Some ABC dudes come in. Apparently, they identify themselves to the bartender, but they don't identify themselves in any legit fashion with anybody that they talk to, but they're doing ID checks in the bar. Hey, we're doing ID checks. I guess this is a thing.
ABC, making sure people are of age.
Of age, right. Chris Young initially gives the guy his ID. The guy takes a photo of his ID, gives it back. They walk through the bar, and then they leave. Well, apparently, and I probably would be the same way. I can imagine. I can see myself doing this, sitting there going, well, what the hell was that all about? I don't know who that guy is. He's taking a photo of my ID, especially if you're somebody like Chris Young.
Yeah. And let's not forget your address is on your ID.
Well, that's right. And you don't really know. This person hasn't. I mean, they maybe have said, I'm an ABC officer or whatever, but you don't know.
We should just go walk around and see how many people will just give us their IDs. Like, we're checking IDs. We don't hold ourselves out as law enforcement. We just say, we're checking IDs. Can I see your ID?
Hey, we're doing an ID check tonight at the Doghouse Saloon, so you need to give me your ID so I can make sure you're of age and see who hands it over. I bet you'll get a lot of them.
A bunch.
So Young's like, what's up? He goes over to the Doghouse Saloon. You can see him inside. He's got some friends, and this is where the altercation happens. The video from inside the bar shows Young, who's in black jacket, black hat, jeans, standing, seemingly waiting for an agent to finish up whatever they're doing with somebody else. They're off camera. These two guys walk by him, and he just reaches out as one would do and kind of puts his hand on his shoulder. Like, hey, man, we don't hear it because there's no audio, but you feel like he's like, hey, I got a question here. And the guy, describe what you saw.
Yeah, he put his hand on his shoulder, and it's very clearly to like have a conversation. It's not like
not aggressive.
And then the presumably the officer shoves him like
to the ground.
Slams
very aggressively.
Very aggressively, two hands to the chest, and he falls back, and it looks like he falls down. And the proportional, it was not a proportional response.
In the initial affidavit, and this is why I will defend good cops. I love you, police officers, you men and women in blue. I know you do too, Cameron.
Absolutely.
But this is what makes it hard sometimes. Because in the affidavit report, the initial report, before the security footage came out, the officer said that Young struck him in the chest, and he pushed Young away to separate himself from the situation. To protect himself.
That's not
what happened. Young was arrested seconds later and charged with assaulting police officers, resisting arrest, and disorderly conduct. Here's what needs to happen in this case. Chris Young needs to have all of this thrown out.
Of course.
Chris Young needs to be apologized to. This is America. You're allowed to ask police officers questions. You're allowed to ask police officers to identify themselves. Police officers, I think, Cameron, you're the lawyer in the group. I think an officer has to offer some level of identification. Like I'm Officer Smith.
There's a lot of different contexts on that one, but generally speaking, if you're just saying, "Hey,
who are you? What's the deal?
Can I see some ID from you? You asked me for mine." And these were plainclothes guys. It appears from the video footage.
Yeah,
they were not uniformed officers.
And at that point, I don't think this is Chris Young, and I don't know the guy, so I'm not just defending him because I know. But at this point, it's not him. He's not given a "don't you know who I am." There's some legitimate in his head. At least it would be. Wait a minute! I just gave somebody I don't know my ID, and he took a photo of it. And I'm a country music star.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I need to ask this dude who he is.
And this was the Alcohol and Beverage Control Board officers.
Yeah.
And my default on this is, look, there's video. It's there. ABC needs to review this incident and say, hey, is this behavior in keeping with our agents? And if not, then impose proper discipline and deal with it. Because this has to be, you have to be so careful in these instances. Because, and even as a lawyer, when I know the law with law enforcement, I may ask a question, but I'll deal with it after the fact. Like when it is I'm
not going to win.
Right.
If we have a real disagreement with law enforcement, know this, and this is Murphy's advice to you, and I think you'll agree. If it's a legit disagreement about what the officer should or should not do, you're probably not going to win that argument that night.
Yeah.
Especially if it escalates to, hey, I'm going to take you to jail unless you do this or that or the other thing. If you're willing to go to jail over the argument, then that's a hill you need to die on, and if you feel like you need to, go for it. But you're probably not going to win the argument until after the fact, and you're going to win a lot more arguments if you stay calm, you don't escalate the situation, you just monitor it and get information.
Yes. And that's where some police officers make bad mistakes, is they're basically, I don't have to talk to you.
Right.
I don't have to say anything to you. Actually, it's the other way around. You don't have to say anything to them. But, in terms of, why are you arresting me? Why are you asking me for my ID? Like the idea of, well, a police officer can just stop you and say, you must show me this, this, and that. No.
Could he have legally refused since there was no suspicion of a crime?
I don't know the context of what was there, and I certainly don't know. With ABC, it's a little unique because they do have a duty to make sure establishments are verifying age, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know whether that means
what's my responsibility in helping them in that? Right.
So I know they have a duty as to the bar operator, right? Like I get to watch you. Are you checking IDs? I don't know if they have a right to go and say to the patrons in the bar, you show me your ID.
Right. I mean,
that's different.
My response, Bell, you and I have gotten drunk over at the Tin Roof before.
Yeah.
On our first ice day together.
Yep.
And if you walked up to me and I don't know who you are, and you say, hey, I need to see your ID, I'm going to tell you to go pound sand.
Yeah.
Like, nah, I'm good. Thanks.
Right.
I already showed it at the door.
And then if you say, no, I'm an ABC guy, I'm an agent, and I'm going around checking IDs, gosh, how would I respond to that?
But I don't know in Tennessee law whether there's a universal right for law enforcement to check your ID.
I mean, Terry stops aren't legal here, are they?
I don't know.
No, Terry stops are legal everywhere.
You have a cop just can. I don't know that a cop can just ask for my identification if I'm not suspected of doing anything wrong.
There is no failure to ID law here. They have to have reasonable, articulable suspicion.
Yeah, that's what you said.
To come up and ask.
Like if I was an ABC agent right now, I would assume you're drunk based on what you just said, and I would want to see your ID.
And that might hold up in court. But if they have to have, again, reasonable, articulable suspicion that you have are about to commit a crime.
So, let's boil this down to a bigger scenario. What right do they have to demand his ID to begin with?
Well, that's what I'm asking is I don't know the rules and regs for ABC and what they can and can't check based on the law. And that's what you would look at.
Like, what right am I granting? What am I giving up walking into that business establishment? That business establishment has the right to require ID. Otherwise, you can walk on down the road. Okay, fine. That's a verbal or individual contract between the business and myself. Why is this third party, the government, stepping in and demanding, even after I show my ID to the establishment? I understand that the business has a license And so they're entering into an agreement with the government. I'm not a party to that agreement, though.
Yeah, well, the reason that I'm hesitant to opine here
I get it.
is because Tennessee has some weird laws. Like the laws related to alcohol and strip clubs, for example, are very strange. And I don't know why I was looking that up the other
Investigated
day.
those deeply, have you?
I have, actually, because this was the cabaret stuff. That's why I was looking at it, the transgender cabaret stuff. And that was the legal section implicated. And I'm like, these laws are weird.
See, someone says, I'm retired Metro Police. If a person is inside patronizing a bar, the ABC has the lawful right to check IDs of those patrons. Under what law?
We can look that up.
So
I thought the Supreme Court had established that there must be reasonable, articulable suspicion.
I don't think we're a stomp and ID state.
We're
like
not.
that.
But this is a different context. That's what I'm saying. It is an establishment that serves alcoholic beverages, and there may be a statutory provision giving them the ability to check ID in those establishments.
And that there's an unspoken agreement, if I'm a patron to that establishment, that I abide by those rules. Maybe so. Maybe so. I'm not trying to be unreasonable about it. I'm just suggesting that if some rando comes up to me and says, hey, I want to see your ID, and I'm at a bar, I'm going to tell them to go to hell. And they're going to get mad at me, and they're going to say, hey, I'm an ABC agent, and I'm important, and I'll push you around. And I'll say,
Let's see some ID.
Let's see some ID. And so they're lucky that Chris Young didn't do that from the beginning, and he thought better of it, and then he gets pushed around and arrested as a result. Oh, well. 250, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Maybe we'll shore some of this up at some point down the road. We've always got tomorrow. We've got Brian Wilson coming up next to tell us what's happening on the drive. That's after this. More to come on this story involving the ABC agent and Chris Young as we get more information. We're going to dig to the bottom of the story and figure it out. Brian Wilson is here. Brian, I just got some information. I don't want to beat you to the punch here, but it appears that based on this leaked audio from Kari Lake, Mr. Campaign Manager has now said bye-bye in Arizona.
Yeah, the GOP chairman of Arizona has resigned, and that's my first story today. It's really remarkable. This started to break yesterday late on my show, and we ran a big clip of it, but it was 10 minutes of raw sound, and we really didn't have a chance to sort of study it the way we wanted to. We were sort of on the fly with it, but, I mean, it's a big story. And we're going to lead with that. And then after we lay it all out, I sort of want to find out what the audience thinks about it. So we'll open up the phone lines.
Yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on, and we'll hear right after 3 o'clock, your thoughts on why it took so long to come out. This apparently happened last March. Apparently.
Well, it's very interesting because apparently this guy, Jeff DeWitt, was Carrie's Lake boss at the time. She was working for him while she was preparing her run. And so this apparently took place at work. And that's why she, you know, if it had been me, I said, get your butt out of my office. I don't want to see you anymore. She didn't do that, and I kept wondering why. Now I understand that a little bit. It's a complex story, and we're going to break it all down coming up right after the news on The Drive. We'll be here from 3 until 7.
Cannot wait.
We'll also, of course, talk about this little New Hampshire primary thing.
Oh, yeah, there was a little something. We didn't talk much about that.
We'll get to that as well, I promise.
A little something happened last night in New Hampshire. Brian Wilson is on top of that story. In moments, right after Mac Morey and the news, there's Brian Wilson and The Drive this afternoon from 3 until 7. We'll be back bright and early at high noon tomorrow, friends. Have a wonderful evening. Hug your loved ones. We'll see you tomorrow, folks. So long.